Ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Gaza is set to be around the corner now. Key mediator Qatar says negotiations are in their final stages, hoping an agreement will be reached soon. Relief, yes, but can it guarantee an end to the bloody and brutal conflict? Here's more.
Hundreds gather in Tel Aviv, hoping and praying that a long-awaited deal for the release of the hostages is finally here. As kin of those taken for his hope. Qatari officials who are part of truce negotiations call it the final stages. The US and Egyptian presidents have urged flexibility from both sides. Israel says the ball is in Hamas's court, and there's a prayer that the worst of the nightmare is over.
Even if a deal is struck tomorrow, and we hope with all our hearts that it will, this will only end, the war will only end, this conflict will only end, the hostilities will only end, recovery can only begin when the last hostage is back home.
In the first stage of the proposed deal, Hamas will free 33 hostages held in Gaza. They're among the 94 still in the enclave, including 34 captives already declared dead. About 1,000 Palestinian prisoners would be freed, say Israeli and Palestinian sources. Israel would maintain a buffer zone up to 800 meters inside Gaza in the first stage. They would withdraw completely only when all hostages are returned. Israel would allow movement of residents from South Gaza to the north. Sources say the talks in Qatar are being conducted with Hamas and Israeli negotiators present in two separate rooms. Hopes are high of an official announcement soon.
The ball is now in Hamas's court. If Hamas accepts, the deal is ready to be concluded and implemented. I believe we will get a ceasefire.
Disagreements have persisted over permanence of any ceasefire, the scale of humanitarian aid for Gaza, and withdrawal of Israeli troops. Even now, Prime Minister Netanyahu rejects a full withdrawal and opposes Palestinian governance of Gaza. The US Secretary of State clarified that Israel would ultimately have to make concessions in the post-war scenario towards reuniting the West Bank and Gaza under a Palestinian authority.
Israelis must decide what relationship they want with the Palestinians. That cannot be the illusion that Palestinians will accept being a non-people without national rights. 7 million Israeli Jews and some 5 million Palestinians are rooted in the same land. Neither is going anywhere. Israelis must abandon the myth that they can carry out de facto annexation without cost and consequence to Israel's democracy, to its standing, to its security.
Most of the kin of the hostages ultimately give credit for definite moves towards a solution to incoming President Donald Trump and his hell will break loose warning.
I think he understands that Bibi is stalling and lying, and I think he simply has decided enough is enough, which is something that should have been done a few months before. I think too many people and too many world leaders should have done this before, and we have pleaded and begged for people to do so, and unfortunately it didn't happen, and hopefully it will happen.
And then the other end of the stick. 62 civilians killed in Gaza in 24 hours, even as a truce deal is said to be near. The Israeli Air Force attacked 50 targets. One wonders if they're really talking about a sudden end to all hostilities. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We are now being joined by Heino Klink, former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for East Asia, live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, and welcome back. So the question many are asking is whether or not this deal to end the violence and return some of the hostages is imminent and certain to happen, or do you think that it may fall through once again at the last minute?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I share the cautious optimism of most observers here in Washington, D.C., as well as in the Middle East, that we are finally on the cusp of a ceasefire. I think we're at this point for a variety of reasons, many of which, candidly, are tragic, in that we've seen this war last so very long, all precipitated by the horrendous attacks of Hamas on Israel of October 7th, 2023. Remembering that attack, amongst all the other things, it also represented a break of a previous ceasefire. So now we're at a point where I think both internally, Hamas is getting to a point of absolute desperation. Israel's getting to the point where they have caused as much military damage to the Hamas terrorist organization as is probably feasible at this point. And the region as a whole has grown tired of this war. And of course, within the U.S. domestic body politique, we have a new president assuming office on Monday. And he has said very clearly that this war must end. Hamas must release the terrorists. And I think all of these factors have driven the parties to the negotiation to the point of compromise.
And do you think that it's premature to talk about post-war Gaza and the future of Gaza? Is this a temporary ceasefire, or can we talk about that? And, you know, especially as you mentioned, in the backdrop of President-elect Donald Trump entering the White House in 5 days' time, could things change in any way?
I think we have to have a measured approach. Let's get to a ceasefire first, even if that is temporary. I think that is the first step. I think that is an essential step. And I think we need to build some trust, as difficult as it may be, between the warring parties. We need to get the hostages home. There needs to be a fundamental understanding that Hamas continuing to hold on to hostages is a non-starter, and that is the prerequisite for any long-term cessation of hostilities and for any conversations about rebuilding Gaza.
All right, Secretary Klink, thank you so much for joining us on WION. Of course, we'll be following this story very closely, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you very much.